Listen. Take a nice, slow, deep breath. We're going to try to be very quiet this morning so that we might hear the wind. Greetings, my name's Cameron Miller, and you have arrived back again perhaps, or maybe for the first time, to Trinity Place here in Geneva, New York. This is a reflection or a sermon on the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verses 1 through 17, and also Genesis as well, the story of Abram. The wind. The wind. The wind is a whisper. The wind is a breath upon your face. The wind is the softest touch of the quietest murmur of the slightest warmth of a tiny breath. The wind is not a storm. The wind is not an explosion. The wind is not a piercing. The wind is not an ecstatic eruption. The wind is not a consuming fire. The wind is a nearly imperceptible breath on the curve of our ear and carries a whisper so soft we can miss it. We do miss it. We often miss it. We have in our lap today the most delicious groceries in the Bible. And in an overabundance, I might add. And I don't know what to eat first. Abram and Nicodemus. The promise and the wind. The hope and the fear. The yes and the maybe. The first thing to say is that we know nothing about either of these characters. The text just starts from scratch with both of them. The text tells us nothing of their personal lives and gives us no clue as to their inner minds or their secret thoughts or their motivations. A good novel would never do that. Our religious tradition projects all kinds of things on these two characters, Abram and Nicodemus. But if we're honest and take them at face value, we know next to nothing about either one. What we have is one guy who says yes and another guy who says no, or maybe he says maybe. We don't know why, and it's not very profitable for us to guess. What we are able to do is observe in the text what they do. Now, God asks Abram to take an adventure. If he agrees, he will let go of everything he knows. He will be adrift from all of his moorings. If he says yes, he will have no frame of reference because all his landmarks will be gone. It will be as if he's stepping out on the ice without knowing if the ice will hold him. Personally, I hate when that happens. I mean, who does that anyway? I want some handrails at least. And to be honest, I want some control. Okay, I want lots of control. But in this story of Abram, he just says, yeah, sure. We don't know if he says yes because he's a simpleton or because he's a saint or a shifty guy who knows a good thing when he hears it. We don't know, we don't get to know any of that in this story. And from the other characters in the Bible who say yes to God, it could be any of those three. Of Nicodemus, we know this much. He was smart and learned. He was a religious authority who had achieved his position over and against the competition. And we can also gather from what the story tells us that Nicodemus is curious but cautious. He's come to the right place for the answers, but he's come under the cover of night, which means he didn't want anybody to see him go in there. Or it could mean that all of his other appointments are already filled. Or maybe Jesus wanted to meet by night, so nobody saw him meeting with Nicodemus. You see, the text doesn't answer our modern questions. We want it to, and we want to ask it all those questions that we have, but then we may miss what the text actually does tell us. We can gather from Nicodemus' answer that he doesn't understand Jesus' play on words. Or maybe he does get the play on words, but he refuses to engage in it. Maybe we didn't get the play on words because it's in the Greek. In the Greek, the word often translated as born again has three possible translations. Born anew, born again, born from above. Now, here's what I notice from that text. There's three slightly different meanings pointing to three different dimensions. Again points to the past. Anew points to time present. Above points to the eternal, timelessness, or a moment out of time. Nicodemus is either a one-dimensional thinker or simply cannot perceive these other dimensions, or he sees them but refuses to entertain Jesus' nuance and complexity. We just don't know what Nicodemus sees and what he doesn't see, or what he hears and doesn't hear. Like Abram, we don't know Nicodemus's motives. What we do know is that these are stories about the holy whispering to us. We know about this. We know about the holy whispering. It isn't miraculous or spooky. The angels of our better natures whisper in our ears, whisper in the wind. The hope of the future whispers on the thinnest of visions. We're not left on our own here on this planet without a clue. No. We get offered help from above or in whatever dimension the help resides. The question is whether God speaks. So the question is not whether or not God speaks. The question is whether we hear. It's not loud. It's not a slam dunk. It's not explosive. The question raised by both these stories is whether or not we will hear those whispers through the flotsam and jetsam of our lives. Now, there may be other things that these stories raise for us, but this is the question poking at me today. Can we hear or apprehend what speaks to us through the thin veil that separates us from other dimensions? Is it possible? Is it truly possible to hear the whispers that would lead and guide us and maybe even send us on a journey without much more than a whisper? Well, I want to back up from the personal nature of these stories for a moment and notice something really fascinating that also influences how we answer that question. The Gospel of John is written by someone who has a Platonic worldview, a Greek-speaking Gentile or a very Hellenized Jew. And what that means is that he, because we don't really know who John was or what his actual name was, has a particular way of seeing the world. So for John, because he's Hellenized, John sees a two-storied universe and a three-dimensional humanity. Two-story universe, three-dimensional humanity. Now don't get fooled, this isn't complicated. He saw heaven above and, quote, the world below. John's always talking about the world. Heaven good, world bad. Heaven could be present in the world, but the world could not be present in heaven. The world was where sin and evil reigned, and where the agents of heaven, who could be heavenly or human, sought to renew the world. As for humans, so that's the two-dimensional. As for humans, John imagined that we are three-dimensional: body, mind, soul. Body, mind, soul. Mind was synonymous with spirit, so it could be body, mind, body, spirit, soul. It was classical Greek dualism in which the universe and the person are composed of these separate dimensions, separate parts and separate dimensions at one and the same time. So why am I telling you all this? Because when we go to Abram, in that story, it's a different world. Whoever first told the story of Abram and Sarah, stories in the book of Genesis, probably sometime around 950 BCE, saw the world and humans as one-dimensional creations of God. While there were spirits abroad in the world, they were of God too somehow. It was an earthy, this worldly action and ethically rooted worldview. There wasn't mind and body or body and spirit. There was just us humans made in the image of God. Not only that, but the world was good. God pronounced it good 3 times at the very beginning. Well, now, why does this difference between the old worldview of Genesis and the new worldview of John matter? Well, it's because you and I, with our modernist worldviews, have sidled up to these stories to compare and contrast ourselves. Our task is not to change the story so that it conforms to our worldview. It's for us to understand the story and see where it's the same or different, and if it whispers anything about the holy to us in our worldview. Now, not all Scripture will. Some of it will look and feel repugnant to us. That tells us something too. There's a word that Jesus seems to have used that got translated as repentance. Christianity has piled a whole lot of baggage onto that word. Its Greek root in the New Testament is the word metanoia. And what it actually meant, as Jesus used it, is to change one's mind, to turn around and be different. In John's worldview of the two-storied universe, metanoia would mean that those of us in the world would change our minds and become heavenly while in the world. Born anew or again or from above is what he meant by that. We would turn around and we'd be different. We'd be born anew. We'd have a new spirit, a changed mind. And from the point of view of the Genesis story, it would mean just saying yes to God's whisper and saying yes over and over and over and over again. Abram didn't say yes just once, but many, many times throughout his very long life. I kind of think that our worldview is more like Genesis than John. We no longer have a two-storied universe. We know that, in fact, we're stardust. We know that in a very material way, our bodies contain elements that came here from exploding stars. Life itself, or the elements that form life, arrived on this planet from millions and billions of light years away. We now measure things in microbes and nanoseconds and light years, but we know that all of it is one. We know that when matter dies, its essential energy does not die but is transformed. That is science as well as theology. Our worldview is more like Abram's because the creator of all that is infused in all of creation. There's no here and there, not really. It's all here. God is all here and is always here, wherever here is. All right, I've gone off the deep end. But the point of these two stories when we stand them up next to our modernist worldview is that we're not born again once and for all, and we don't say yes just once and for all. We are continually asked or invited or compelled to metanoia over and over and over again. Our minds or spirits must be changed over and over and over again. Our way of thinking must change over and over and over again. Our understanding must change over and over and over again. It does not matter what Abram's motives were or whether he was a simpleton or a saint, because he said yes over and over and over again. It doesn't matter what crippled Nicodemus, his desire to hold onto security or his intelligent reason. It doesn't matter who we are or what we do, how young or old, our condition or our dysfunction. We're all capable of hearing the whispers that call to us from the gentle lips of the very God who is the universe. The God of the universe, who is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the creator of all that is and ever will be, whispers to you and me. Those whispers empower us to change and to keep changing. Those whispers enable us to say yes over and over and over again, even when we might really want to say no or go away. Those whispers allow us to change our minds and to turn around and be born anew. If we assume that such whispers are impossible or a fantasy or superstition, then we may never hear them. Our mind will be closed, our rebirth aborted, our capacity to change diminished. The whispers are real, and they really are in the wind and part of our ordinary life as we live it, not from above, but from here and now and within and around. A thin sound, carried upon the lightest breath, winds its way around the curves of our ears and into our hearts. And no matter who or what or how talented or how wounded we are, we're capable of hearing it. Pretty good stories, aren't they? Peace be with you.